what does the future of immersive experiences look like? Let's discuss. Welcome to Princess and Scoundrel, where we take you along our scrappily ever after, from Fantasyland to Tatooine and everything in between. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Steven.
And yes, we're having a conversation about Starcruiser.
But
it's different, guys.
It's a little bit different.
It's a little bit different this time. Not only are we've brought in an expert, but like the expert, one of the people that actually helped to create the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser. So it is an absolute honor to have the current head of Immersive Experience for Culture House Immersive and the former, probably as you better know her, the former director of immersive design for Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser, Mikhael Tara Garver. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And because Disney would care, I'm going to say I was the director of Immersive Experiences for the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser. That is my title.
It's a very lengthy title.
Yes, but it has to be said that way every time with great respect. And there's so many people that worked on it that I always like to make sure that. And I am the founder of Culture House Immersive. But so thrilled to be here. I said this before. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but before we got on, which is just that I have such from a beloved distance, just have such a special place in my heart for the fans of the experience that we built, and in particular the way in which they have treated and taken care of the cast and crew and creatives that I love so dearly. Just honored them. And so thank you for having me here. I'm just as excited.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're like truly thrilled. We're like, oh my gosh, we're finally getting to talk to her today.
Yeah.
Like, this is a big deal.
Well, no, it always felt like it's like, oh my gosh, like one day we'll be able to interview her and have a discussion with her. And
we talked like a year ago, and then just life has been busy, and we've finally come around to like, okay, let's have the conversation.
But I think the big thing too is there was a lot of crazy going on. Like Starcruiser, a lot of emotion. A lot of emotion, and I think it's a good time. It's a good time because now we're a year past, and we could talk about like, here's Starcruiser, but we had that time to vet, just kind of like, okay, process it. What
to
part
grieve.
of Starcruiser? Yeah, to
grieve. Truly.
But what part of it do we enjoy, right?
Yeah. And I think also, Sarah, when you and I first reached out, when we first chatted, I think it was still running. And, to speak to where we are right now, like, I mean, that was the first time we talked about it. And we're all able to have a very different, yes, do I still wish that I could go to a ship and go to a place that feels very close to my heart and journey with some of my captain and my friends and all of those things to galaxy far, far away? Absolutely. And I think right now we're in the next stage, and there's more I can talk about, not about necessarily that experience, but about how that is powering the future of this work. That had it still been running would have been hard to do. And all the creatives and artists would have still been kind of locked in doing that versus building the future, which I think is what's happening now.
That is exciting. That's not even something that I think we even considered. But before we get to what's going on empowering the future of immersive experience, let's go all the way back. What is it that grabbed you about immersive experiences that basically fueled you to start working in that field?
Well, it wasn't a field, right? So
you're making the
little
field
bit right now. I mean this in the best way, right? Like, I was making immersive 25 years ago before we had words for it. I always say, like, I am deeply obsessed and interested in a couple of things, but mostly how entertainment relates to audience and creates relationships that then passes it on and creates more relationships, right? And how we create spaces of belonging, and how we create spaces where people not only have multiple ways to relate to an experience, but they have ways to relate to each other. And like, I can say that now because now I am 25 years later, but that's what I was experimenting with, right? I was in Chicago, and really it was at first to solve a business problem. I had founded a nonprofit. I worked for a series of businesses, and the nonprofit was founded it was called Uma Productions, my first artistic family. And we were founded in June of 2001, which meant our first production was going to be in November of 2001. And you couldn't raise money, nor as a person who lived in the world was that the right thing to do. And really I was like, how do we bring people together? How do we figure out how to like look at the future? I mean, it was in my lifetime, I think when we hit COVID, right, that was the only other paradigm shift. Maybe for me, there are other moments of elections and things like that, but like huge paradigm shifts. And so I didn't have the ability I had never saw myself or imagined I could be a working artist. And from the outset, I knew I had to have a financial way of thinking to sustain both myself and the creatives. And so we started using our tools to experiment and making experiences. And while I did that, I was partnering with small businesses, so they were engaged in the experiences. And over the years of our nonprofit, 75% of our budget was built on these experiences. And that meant that we were building entertainment, and I was getting to experiment at a really early age. And there was just recently email marketing at the time. So like we were engaging in how that started the experience. So I started then around thinking about how technology and live experiences connected. Like I was just curious, and just, kept following that curiosity, and that curiosity has led me to many places all the way to the galaxy and beyond. And everywhere from making the Black Label Bacon Strip show for Hermel to AMC's first immersive upfronts, to getting commissions by the Goodman Theater to create a brand new experience that I created with a team of undocumented creators called Post Nation around the kind of journeys through post offices. So like I built a thing for the New York Public Library that was around finding the underlying underbelly of the mysteries of libraries. And in all of those experiences, when I think about it, I wasn't going like, this is immersive, this is this is this. I was just figuring out that relationship with audience, how narrative could thrive, and also how to design things for people who don't necessarily run to the front row and jump up and down.
Okay, I gotta kind of interject right here. I love that you kind of say, you say that you are developing these experiences not to be immersive, because right now I feel like it's this sexy word like AI, like everything's AI, everything's immersive. And it's like, at what point is it just an automated system? Like AI, it's just an automated system. You're just typing it in and it's giving you something. Like there's not this artificial intelligence. Same thing with immersive. Like, the Ren Fair has been here. The Civil War reenactments have,
Totally.
At what point do you give it you as a person that's experiencing it, you're part of the, immersion, and you get to contribute to that experience. And I think that's where it's like, it's different from just, all these other things where we've actually had impact on it, or we've got to like be, touch buttons or,
right. It's not character dining at a theme park. Yeah. It's like you're actually actively involved in it.
Well, I feel like you just teed me up. Did you know? So like the system that I've been developing over the years, I've now named immersive involvement, right? That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in building. And so that's how I built a system of training, of working with designers, of working with technologists. That's what I say now. And I have to give some credit to one of my colleagues, Jeffrey Jackson Scott, who in early years was when a lot of theaters or arts organizations were talking about community engagement. He was like, I'm not interested in community engagement. I'm interested in community involvement. And in doing that, right, it is an empowering, but there is a deep craft. And that's the part that I think with everything being immersive, I look at it, I have to look at the positive, which is like, this crazy way that I saw the future is now what it is, right? Like my good friend Carrie, who's one of my partners in Culture House Immersive, says, it can be really painful to be 15 minutes ahead of what's happening. Yeah. And there's a lot of years of, and still even, right? I go into rooms and I'm convincing people of a thing that is so clear, right? It's just so clear.
To you, right?
What to you. Yeah.
100%. And also because I know the level, usually people's pushback is like, it's too expensive. I'm like, well, we're not using the right business model. There's better business models. Or their pushback is, and not the tickets, I'm talking about building it, right?
Right.
And then, or they'll say, it's not scalable. I'm like, well, we're not building it properly to scale. Like if you build the creative and the business does. Or I have a lot of creators who will say to me, like, I don't want to be told what to do. And I'm like, well, then you're going to the wrong immersive. Like, then that's not immersive involvement. If I'm told what to do, that's coercion and not consent and all those things. So designing the quality and then scaling out all of those tools is absolutely in response to what you're saying about involvement and designing for that and designing scripts that way and designing narrative structures that way. Like it's all embedded in how that works. And if you're involved, you're more willing to spend money. Yeah. You're more willing to buy merchandise. You're more willing to align with a brand. You're more willing to travel to meet other fans. You're more like all of those things. So it's both a financial and a cultural reasoning for me around the work. Does that make sense?
So like we've been trying to sit here and dissect like what is it about immersive that is a hurdle. You're talking about being 15 minutes ahead of everybody else. And you've been doing this for a little while now. So like what is it that you've seen? What we've seen is like, the technology, like you said, email marketing was just coming out whenever you started. So like technology has just like exploded since email marketing. You've got
25 years ago.
Yeah. You have marketing to people, like trying to get the word out there for people to understand what it is that you're trying to do when it's not something that they've ever heard of or thought about before in that light. And then getting people to like actually let go and play, because I think that's one of the biggest things, and we talk about a lot, is like it is so hard to play as an adult and really let go and get immersed and involved in these things. That's another hard point, like getting people to buy into that. So what are the things that you've seen over your time in immersive, creating these immersive experiences or engagements that you've had to tackle?
I think that also, like, to say I'm 15 minutes ahead, like also there are a small group of us who have been, right? And we've all been in this, like, around the country having these conversations. And now, I've spoken at 5 conferences in the last 6 months, right? Like it is now the thing, but much like AI, it's always been the thing. It's just like AI has been existing and we've been spell checked and tracked for quite some time. Like my emails have been writing themselves before this is not new. Just like immersive is not new, right? Like, and to give credit to Disney, like if you look at Disney's original strategies, right? Like the reason Disney was successful in its parks were because they evolved very quickly to building worlds. And they weren't necessarily, like, they understood what they were doing, but I think that it was underestimated how much building those worlds, and the research wasn't being done around how building worlds where people could build culture together and have a culture of fun and play would create a long-term investment in a brand. Right. So like I could get nerdy and like behind me are the books and like be like, neurologically, if you sensorily and if you have a moment where you are playing and you are releasing and you are breathing differently, like your physicality, if you're like, I'm relaxed, I'm not, as you said early on, like worried about people watching me, I'm not feeling uncomfortable, I release and suddenly I am more connected to the world around me. Right. And so if I'm more connected to the world around me, I have more of a relationship with the things around me. That could be a Disney park, that could be a story, that could be a character, that could be the other people with me. Right. And so it's hard to get to a space where play and joy is the most important thing. So immersive has been happening. And also like Immersive was campfires. Immersive was all those things. The truth is now we human differently. So when a campfire worked, it was because humaning meant that was the one moment we'd all traveled across many lands to get around a campfire, and that's where we shared and we looked at the stars and we understood the expanse of being human. And now we're human this way. We're human in the way that people are going to listen to the podcast. We're human in the way that we communicate on our phones. We're human in the way that we participate with AI, with all these technologies. And I actually don't think any one of them are bad. And I don't think live is bad or better. I think the hard part is we haven't designed immersive experiences that transition people between technology experiences and live. So that that whole humanness is not always dealt with. It's bifurcated. It's like, here's my VR experience, here's my this experience, here's my that experience. And I think it's what some of the work that was revelatory around Starcruiser and the things that I got to do in building Starcruiser that I've been looking towards for years was about combining all of those tools, all of the ways we're human in one world, and collaborating with an expansive team from so many expertises. Because when you walked on the ship, you were never like, oh, I see, there's my game experience and there's my this. You just got to be. You got to show up and live in the world as a human and have that world reflected back to you in all the ways that you're human. Was that?
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, no, but I mean, okay, so kind of going off what you're saying, I think isn't our human experiences also the hurdle? Because initially it was that campfire, so we were satisfied with that, and then slowly there's like, here's a reenactment, here's this, we keep wanting, we crave more, because going on Starcruiser, this becomes now that gold standard of like, I want this experience where I have multiple, like I could go to sleep, I eat this experience,
You're living it.
I'm living it.
Yeah.
Regardless of if it's this IP that we like, it was an experience where I felt involved, or I'm angry at the bad guys. I'm cheering on the good guys, but I'm involved in it, and it kind of changes me afterwards.
Yep.
Now here's my gold standard. Like, is it another hurdle where like, okay, how do I top that? How do I get involved? Like, how do I care about anything else type of thing?
Totally. I mean, I always say, look, there's two things, and I want to say two things on what you said. The first is like, the gold standard was not about, I would say, I would argue that you're going to have an extraordinary experience, even if you don't sleep somewhere, even if there's not all the bells and whistles. I think it is the craft of the integration of everything that is, and the narrative and the way that narrative really worked, that made that experience extraordinary. I think the closest experience, like I always say, like what we're talking about is that feeling. People always ask me to build that feeling. And what I think that is this experience of like, I can be myself. I can play and get angry. I can experiment in feelings that I don't get to experiment in, right? Like I can get angry and like I'm not going to get in trouble. I can disagree. Yeah. I can laugh. I can dance. I can do these things that like, especially for me, although it doesn't seem like it, a relatively like awkward, shy person, I don't feel comfortable jumping out in front and doing that. And I don't want to feel like I have to belong. And so I would argue that like the gold standard, yes, we need production value. Yes, we need quality, but we need quality of the content and quality of the way in which it's designed. And I think, yes, there is a hurdle right now, but actually I feel more hopeful about that hurdle than I ever have because of the scale of, now what that feels like, the scale of audience and talent that have come out of that Starcruiser experience, knowing that it's possible.
Yeah.
And I spent most of my career being like, totally, I can make you this one-off experience where you're living in Mad Men and you're doing this, but like, this is just the commercial of what a feature film could be, right? And we've been making commercials, and so now, even for the limited people who have, it's a lot more than before. They understand the impact that the like what I call feature immersive entertainment can have, you know?
So that's what I was going to ask is, all of the things that you had done up before Starcruiser, they were limited to a few hours of time of engagement with the audience. Whereas Starcruiser, that's multiple days. Like, how do you go into a project like that where you're like, I'm going from Mad Men or from Museum in a Box or from all of these things that you've done to, all right, now I have to do something that engages people for 2 full nights?
So here's the fun part, which is I don't actually think all the experiences that I built were for a couple of hours. One of the projects that changed the game for me is a project we still have in our building in our slate called Fornicated that I built in 2008. Mm-hmm. And for 2 weeks prior to the live rock show, there was an entire experience happening online where characters were able to then text with audience members as they signed on. And it was a real meeting. It wasn't like, hey, you're my brother, I am now texting you. It was like, hey, Sarah, I found your number on a napkin. Have we met before? And so a real conversation started. And also we were telling their stories. We had built a 2-week arc that was happening and their stories were existing as like, if they were going through a breakup, they didn't say, I'm going through a breakup. They showed a lot of photos on Facebook of them out really late at night or whatever it was, right? Or like meaningful pictures of their shoes. And so all I mean by that is I'd been experimenting not just, I think that what we underestimate is that, yes, Starcruiser was a 2-day, 3-night experience and we got to do within a closed world a lot of really extraordinary things. But I think myself and a few others had been experimenting with what does a narrative universe need to be to sustain a longer term fandom and build culture. Because what Fornicated did is the live rock shows that we integrated all these stories into, we could install it in a sound check and we could do it with different bands each night. We still have fans now. We did it the last time in 2008 who are like, this experience changed how I started to think about what this could be. And for a variety of reasons, it went on the shelf for a while and now we're rebuilding it for music festivals and all those things. But I think that when I say I showed up at Starcruiser, really fortunate that it came at a moment in my life and I was asked and trusted to be there at a moment in my life where I'd play tested out a lot of the tools that were required. It never felt too big to me. So Starcruiser, the narrative, the scale of it when I showed up did not feel overwhelming. And I think that was the part that was surprising to everyone when I showed up. Because I was like, no, it's big. I get it. Once you open the doors this wide, you got to deal with the whole world. You got to deal with what's here. You got to deal with all of it. But we've got to now build a narrative universe for this story that Star Wars as a galaxy was built for.
Right.
And the designers and creators of the format and the structure of the experience really understood the way that you showed up and how all that worked was going to lend itself to it. But the details of how to build that all out was a real process that we all did together that is a very different process than the big conceptual process.
Well, as you're saying you're the how you're setting it up, like it gets me kind of giddy because I'm like, it would probably just go right over your head, or it would go right over my head if I saw like these text messages. I'm kind of like, oh, okay, like 2 + 2 is not going to equal 4 yet. It has to get to a point where, oh, this makes so much more sense. And it's same thing with like the Starcruiser. For me, the draw-in was Star Wars, but it wasn't anything necessarily in Starcruiser that was like, I'm staying there for Star Wars. Like it got me there. It got me to the door because of Star Wars. But then once I got in there was so much more else that, oh, okay, this is what's going, like understanding the other elements of I'm helping this guy out. But it's not like you said, there's not a director saying, okay, you need to go talk to this person, go stand in line here. It was just more just naturally that you had to discover it. And find out about it. So I think, again, hearing about this other thing, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, just you're going to the concert, but you're getting text messages from friends type of thing. Like that's a cool
But I
idea.
think also the thing you're speaking to, right, where like no one was telling you what to do, and then you just got to discover it. Like there is what I call directed freedom. I'm doing this because I'm looking at the chart that is in my head that we built over time, right? And it's not the chart everyone online tried to make and think of. It's a dramaturgical, like it's a story-based thing that I look at to think about, okay, if there's a big macro, this is how the world works, right? A big macro event happens, right, in the universe. And it impacts us all in different ways. Somebody sees it on the news, somebody is on the bridge and it comes across and someone says it directly. Some people hear it in passing. Some people kind of get the sense that something is going on and ask someone. Some people get it through a text. Some people, and so the craft of it was about understanding behavior so that the way in which you were participating in the world wasn't, let me tell you this thing and now I need you to do this. It was letting you discover it and then be discovering it with characters who could get your help in figuring out how to solve. And so that meant that you were being listened to, right? But going back in terms of the onboarding, right? A lot of people will say to me, well, it was Star Wars. Of course it brought in people. And my answer is, you can do this without established IP if you think about the other things that will allow us to show up for something. So I will show up for something that is a behavior I already do. And so, for example, if I already, maybe not even already, if like, first of all, right, there's all the research that I think people are spending 65% more now on experiences, and that's only growing. You have the majority of the population seeking out experiences. They can't get to the quality they want. And this is slated to be like a $500 billion industry by 2030. So like there is consumer desire. And what happens is they go to an experience and it doesn't participate. They feel lost. They don't know how to play and they don't know how to do it. So they're seeking experiences, and the ticket price has to be accessible and all those things, which are a whole other story. And so what I think a lot about is how do we start from behavior that people recognize and where they feel safe? So we have experiences. If Fornicated, for example, starts with texting and leads to a rock show, I know what I do at a rock club. We're not asking you actually to do anything different. And we're participating with you in the way that you would normally participate at a rock show. And then it becomes extraordinary. All these things happen around you. But like, we're not asking you to start from like, now I need you to jump on one foot and I need you to cover your eyes and I need you to whisper in someone's ear. In fact, you can just be you, how you would be at a rock show. And now we're going to create an experience that evolves and responds to that with a story and structure and experience. Or roller skating rinks, or it's why I built experiences that launched in libraries, or the post office. I know I get in line. Like, I'm interested in how do we create fantasy from a learned behavior? Because that, in my mind, is what also no one has really credited, I think, or I've heard, what the creators and Mauro and Scott and Sarah and Wendy understood about the framework of an Anisha of it being a cruise and you showing up as a passenger. Yeah. That let you have a behavior you knew how to do, and then and you could show up as you, or you could show up as whoever you wanted to be, and then it could do all the things. Yeah. So that's how we get over this hurdle is actually not, it all has to be IP that exists. It exists. I think some of it should be, but really more so, how do we meet people where they are and in the behaviors that feel safe?
So getting people to get in the door in something that they're comfortable in and then taking them further beyond that. But what is it, I guess, when you were, any of the experiences that you've helped to create, that you've founded, that you've worked on, and Starcruiser inclusive of that, what is it that you're hoping people get from those experiences when you're crafting them?
So this maybe also, I'm talking about this a lot, so I get a little bit emotional, but I think underneath it all for me is I want spaces of belonging. And I also want to model for people what it means to create spaces of belonging so they go out into the world and do that. Not because we're telling them to, but because they had, again, behavior. I feel like probably I'm impacted by the fact that like my mother's a psychologist and my sister is has her PhD in education, and I think a lot, and also like I'm open about this in certain of my spaces, but like I had a pretty traumatic accident 12 years ago that impacted my cognitive functioning and my synesthetic functioning, so my sensory functioning. And so that was in my 30s, right? So like suddenly that all changed. And I'd always been doing this way, but I don't think everything happens for a reason, but I think that like the reason I've made is that it means that it literally from that moment forward experienced cognitively and physically experienced the world differently. The world felt literally physically different. Mm-hmm. And so I think that creating spaces of belonging that are designed for me to show up with the pace, time, and way that I need to join that. This, like this also goes to multilingual spaces and spaces that are created and experiences that are created and understand cultural biases and understand like what a person may need to feel like they can belong is very different for all of us. And you can't make it for everyone, but you can design to my goal is that once you've been in a space like Starcruiser, the thing for me was that there's a sense of belonging and that and that you can feel a sense of belonging even in a space where you disagree. Because if we could culturally figure out how to disagree and still care about each other, whew, right? Like, please, sir. Like, I would like, and the most meaningful experiences from fans that were articulated to me of that experience were people telling me like, I have not known how to communicate to a person different than me in a high stress space. I have not known in fact, a lot of straight bro men writing me and saying, I have not known how to connect with others in a space where there is high tension, where there is cultural tension. I have not known what my role is. I have not known how to do it. Now, then you also have, so to me, looking at what is a space where they've modeled the behavior of how to show up for Gaia. Mm-hmm. They've modeled the behavior of how to save an indigenous stone, right? And not make it about them. Right. What does that mean about how they then go out into the world? We didn't say to them, like, let us teach you a lesson, right? Right. They just did it. And then in doing it, that behavior becomes a habit, right? Now I'm like, oh, this isn't as scary to do it. Now I can go out, like you were saying earlier, now I can go out in the world and I'm not going to go save an indigenous stone, but I know how to not center myself in and still be of service in something that is important for someone culturally that isn't mine. And that, like, on a cultural level, I'm like, whoo, like that gets exciting. That's how we take care of each other, right? But we all have to feel that sense of belonging to then let us practice new behaviors.
So everybody that's listening to this,
gorgeous.
Mikhael predicted that this podcast would get started because, before we started recording, we kind of mentioned and I wanted to give my adoration for this experience, but and I've said it before that I've always felt that I was a closeted Star Wars fan because it was a nerdy thing, the whole, you get picked on type of thing. But mm-hmm. when I went to experience this thing, I felt more comfortable with myself and more comfortable with showing that. and seeing other people feel comfortable at whatever, color, creed, or, race, whatever. It was something that brought us together, like regardless of whatever was going on.
Right.
Like here's something that brought us together, and we were able to understand. And I think coming back home, there was just like this corny, this little spark where it was just like, let me continue that. Let me continue the people that felt safe there. This is okay to be, to feel safe.
Right.
Like, let's take some of those learnings that we did, like in this experience. Let's continue those, so again, I commend you because you were 15 minutes ahead and you knew this podcast was going to be.
But I think I think like we're all nerdy about something, right? And like it got cooler to be nerdy as we've gotten older, right? Yeah. Like it's gotten cooler. It's for sure. So let's acknowledge that. But the meaningful emails and messages I get are people being like, I'm a better parent. I'm a better partner. I'm listening better. I have I know how to make friends in a different way now. Like I'm like those notes, like, beyond to me, that is, and in fact, also like the women of color who I've watched write whole passages about how they felt themselves seen in Star Wars in a way, and like the depth to which we made a room of women of color to support building Gaia's story for that exact reason. Like that does not happen accidentally, right? And like that's one thread of that. But then there's also, how do you center a non-binary droid and not talk about it, right? Again, it's not about like, let me tell you what we're doing, everyone. It's just doing it. And then we start to live in a world that's doing that. And then we start to practice it. And I think then hopefully people who have not felt experiences of belonging, it is true that once you do have had that, once you've played at it, your body and your mind starts to know how to do it out in the world. And I don't think it's corny, that spark. Like, I believe in that spark. I believe that's the stars in the galaxy, right? All those sparks is how the stars in the galaxy work.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think the hardest part is how to keep that spark alive. And the world makes it really hard to do that. And so we have to keep making this work. And making it in such a way that's, at least for me, I want to keep making this work at scale and at scope, that there's more and more of those stars.
Yeah. I mean, I think here's one of the tragedies of Starcruiser closing. It's like we saw impacts in our children growing on that ship. Like our son is more reserved, and you could see over a voyage him running off with other kids and having a purpose and feeling like they were as involved as the adult standing next to them in a small group in the engineering room. And that was beautiful. And like talking about the non-binary droid, our youngest, like she asked me, she was like, well, why do they call it they? And I'm just having a conversation with her. I said, this is a droid, but some people don't identify as this or that or the other. And then I had somebody that overheard the conversation and reached out to me after the fact and was like, I appreciate that you had that conversation with your daughter because I identify as non-bi. And I was like, we're just talking about droids. Like, to me, it wasn't a big deal, but it has impacts on other people, and it had an impact outside of that ship. Our son being less reserved and being more willing to talk to other people and get involved in things that happened because of that ship. Us starting this podcast, us doing these other things, like it has lived on, and we've seen a lot of things evolve from Starcruiser, thankfully. But like you said, and that's like, I think that's this thing that's been weighing on me for the last year, is like, we can't let this fall apart. How do we keep this going? And it's a struggle when there isn't a physical place that you can go anymore to feel that feeling that you did, that ignited the spark, if you will. That's what we're just gonna have to call this episode, is igniting the spark.
Well, and I think also we've ignited the spark, and now we have to light the fire, right? Like, it's like, yeah, the spark is a light. And for me, I've watched this, I have such a strong memory of sitting across from a couple of the performers when I first met them in their first week and being like, look, you are either going to be addicted to this work when this is done, or you're never going to want to do it again. But once you do it, you're not going to want, if you're addicted, you will never want to do anything else, because you will have deeper relationships. You will have a deeper impact. You will feel a different thing. And one of the actors always calls me and he's just like, I'm so mad because you were right. And now nothing is working. Like, I go and do the things that I do, but also now there was that phase, and now I'm talking to some of those cast members, and they're figuring out how to integrate it into what they're doing, right? So there is that. It's having that impact. Some of them have gone on to like get masters in having like in doing research around what it means to both take care of performers and audience members in challenging experiences, right? But I do think I've lived in the, my grief around Starcruiser closing was manyfold. But one of the things was like, I had proof of the impact on on culture, and I wanted as many people to experience that proof so that we could have to convince people less that it could really work. And I think all I believe is that, but what I will say to you as somebody who has been a believer for 20 years, and even if I didn't have all the words for it, is there's more people who believe now than ever before. And we are actually, I'm betting on the fact, and I believe that we are in the right moment for more of this work to get built, and for more of these experiences to get built. It's hard because it's ecosystem building. It's not like, hey, I can go to there and order one immersive, please. Like it doesn't work that way. But that's, not to say this is the point of but like that's what we're doing at Culture House Immersive. Like, yeah, we're doing what I've been building towards for 20 years of how we scale both licensed and original experiences with this immersive involvement underneath it, which helps both the business and it helps the culture building of those experiences.
So that's a perfect like just kind of segue. Like, you after that you founded Culture House, and really talking about this culture. And what do you think is the future of this immersive experience? Because you're talking about these ecosystems, like that has to be, I mean, in my head right now, I'm like, that's the most daunting part. Like, it's not just creating this room or this hotel, it's creating this whole ecosystem of like, it has to be a little bit ahead of time, or maybe a little bit after, like, the mind starts going. Like, what do you think is the next step for you to like, okay, this is how I start doing this? Or, I mean, I'm pretty sure you're already like,
yeah, what's the future look like? Yeah. Just tell us, please.
Well, no, I'll say what we're doing right now. And also just to clarity, right? So I did Starcruiser. I have I just want to point credit towards Wendy Anderson and Scott Trowbridge and Anne Morrow Johnson and Sarah Thatcher and Anisha Deshmani, who I came in I want to be really clear. Like, I got a phone call and came in the last 9 months, and Morrow has lovingly said, like, I carried the football for the last 9 months because they had been carrying that football for 6 years, and they were tired, and it was COVID, and they had fought for that thing to exist. So anytime and there are some, like, I could just list the people and it would take me forever, like all of the designers that I got to work with. And it's the first, I want to also note, it's the first project I ever worked on where on day one when I showed up, I had never worked with anyone before.
Wow.
In that team.
That's daunting.
So yeah, but I'd walked into a lot of rooms where I was the crazy person. And so this was a completely different experience of that, right? Like, I was the disruptor. And so a disruptor with care, as one of my colleagues said to me once, I'm a disruptor who doesn't enjoy being disruptive to people's feelings. So I want to just honor that, right? And also honor that, like, if you've worked on something for 6 years, the amount of trust that was given to me over the period of time that I was there to become their partners in building it and in building this last section, and to bring in the partners of all the players that were in that building and all of their trust, that is ecosystem building, right? And I've been practiced at it my whole career because that is the only way this work has worked. Like, I've learned how to go and sit down with the people running the New York Public Library and be like, look, I'm not going to make a problem for you. I'm just going to do this thing over here. And then I'm going to prove to you that it's going to make this thing happen. And hey, let me go sit down with your security guard, and let me make friends with this librarian, and let me think about like how we're going to sell new stories by the authors. And it's just about, I've been thinking about that ecosystem building and the tools of that for my whole career, and business now, frankly, is pivoting and has to be a more ecosystem to succeed, has to be an ecosystem, right? Like, there, we are past the moment of like, I released this big film and that is now I win, right? Like, you have to think about, what is that film related to, and what is its relationship to culture, and what are the ways that, how are we releasing it? Because we can't just imagine it's going to go in movie theaters. And what is the, it's all, even at those kinds of commerce levels, it's ecosystem. But also since COVID, you have a lot of people who moved out of the kind of what can be considered major cities and started to invest locally. And so we also, over the years, I've invested in making work in Denver and New Orleans and Lincoln, Nebraska, where I was teaching, and all of these different places that are creatively fueled. And are now financially getting more fueling because people have moved home and invested in where they're from. I don't think it's anymore like, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere in New York. I love New York, but like, I don't think that that's the way that things grow and thrive. And I haven't believed that for a really long time. So that ecosystem building in a large scale is something I've been doing. I mean, I even told you the story of like, my first way of building resources for my theater company was doing that, right? It was like, oh, the small business, which will work with this. And I didn't like, to me, that feels also like we're all interdependent, and it can be really scary because like, it means you have to count on people. And it means you have to be really clear, which is to a fault what I am, which is like, I'm really clear with people about what it requires, what the risk of that is. And so building an ecosystem can feel messy and scary, but it's also, I think, how businesses right now are surviving and thriving. If you look at any business that's growing, it's because of their partnerships. And so there's that, right? So the ecosystem building is something I'd always done. And what we're doing right now, so Culture House, I feel like I'm monologuing, so I apologize.
No, I'm just
because like I'm excited, like, because when you're saying that, for me, like I'm thinking in this like kind of archaic thinking of like, well, I've got to, if you want a job done right, I got to do it myself, and that's not the way to think. The way to think is like, hey, for it to be better, let me get the right person to do the right job or the right part of that job, and let me get another person to get the part of that job. It's like,
and trust them
and
to
trust
do
them
it.
and be able, and instead of me trying to like, oh, you're not understanding, it's like, no, let me figure out a way to articulate myself so you do understand, and we could get this done better.
And the project will be better in the end. Yeah.
And you just articulated Sammy's journey right there, right? Like, Sammy's journey on the ship is Sammy realizing like, well, I should just leap out there and do it, right? And I knew a lot of people like that in the world. And Sammy's journey over it is going like, but wait, if what I do is I stand in this room and I'm like, okay, I can trust you to do this part because this is what you're really good at doing. And what do you think you can do? Oh, you can do that well? I can trust you. Again, we're modeling behavior of ecosystem building, right? We're like, because Sammy is in real time realizing like, Lenka realizes that too. Like, it was a huge, in that realization of those narratives, they were realizing that, right? And so if they're having that realization, anyway, so yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
So what we're doing right now, Starcruiser.
What you can't tell us, can't tell us, I know
I can tell you a lot. So it's exciting.
Yeah, because you alluded in the beginning of the episode that Starcruiser kind of had to close for what's happening right now to go the way that it's going. Not like we're hoping the Starcruiser closed.
No,
but as a result, all these things are happening.
I certainly was not hoping that it closed. I will say it this way, which is that, much like I said, I had an accident in which I don't think everything happens for a reason. It's the reason you make. I don't think it closing happened for the right reasons. Or for reasons that feel good to me, not my jurisdiction, right? But there is a lot of reason and positive reason that is coming out of that happening. And I think that is about the scale of talent, right? Like the ever famous in this community, Kieran O'Connor, who, if you watch any video, she is the Saja that everyone loved from Starcruiser and was Rey, and, is one talent of many who is now working with me at Culture House Immersive as their head of talent development, is an incredible leader, is right now building projects for us with my support. And that she knows inherently the scale of what this work can be and the impact of it. And so now there is talent that in all the different roles they're going to fill in building this ecosystem that sees it and gets it. There are fans who have come to me and been like, I want to produce this work. I want to make more of this work happen in the world. And we've been able to engage them as producers, right? Like, I'm not going out and asking fans for that because I don't want to be hustling that. But like, I don't feel good about hustling that. But when someone is coming to me and saying like, I want more of this in the world, I have the skills to be a business person and a producer. How do I start doing that? I'm like, great. Let me engage you in that. How do we start? You understand the potential. So there's that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I left, so I ended Starcruiser, and then I was really fortunate that Scott Trowbridge invited me to come back to Imagineering for about 8 months. I was a creative consultant there and got to do some really incredible international work, which play testing out some international work, which was really awesome. And also was able to prove out internally that it didn't take 2 days and 3 nights to have this kind of impact. And so there was that, which was great. But as I was there, I think I was realizing there was a business model around building immersive that I had been funded by an organization called Pop Culture Collaborative to build in 2018. And no one was ready for it then. And it was about, you can't try to build unicorns. Like, I was on the original team in Boston for Sleep No More, right? One of the original directors, the staff director there. And everyone wants immersive to be a unicorn, an immersive project. They want it to to have to do everything. And a field is not built that way. And so I had understood that we needed a slate and people to invest in a slate of development of projects. So multiple projects at once, each with some that are licensed projects, some that are original projects, and with creators embedded in the ownership structure so that you're building a sustainable business for these immersive creators that can then continue to create work, right? And luckily in 2018, my brain started working around that model. And as I was working around that model and got a lot of support in building that, then time passed in Starcruiser, but also me really having and embedding relationships with a lot of venues around the country who were coming to me to consult and say like, how do we make immersive here? And I would consult and then I would feel like, but I don't even have shows to point to for you. Like, I can't be like, and now program this, right? There were a couple, but not enough to build a pipeline. And so we at Culture House, so when I left Disney, when that contract ended, my very good friends at Culture House Media, one of my dear friends for years, Carrie Twigg, and then her partners, Rachem and Nicole, we had been in conversations for years, and they're a traditional entertainment media or more traditional Black, brown, female-owned studio that had been at the intersection of pop culture and kind of culture change. And they just released a show about Black Twitter, and they did 50 years of women in hip hop, ladies first, and like they were they're just an incredible powerhouse of women who come from different backgrounds. And so Carrie and I had always been like, someday we'll find the way that we come together. And it was kind of like, well, if not now, when? And we weren't fully ready. We were like, well, okay, so we're going to build this partnership. So Culture House Immersive is a company that is in partnership with Culture House Media and is built on this business model. We then raised, I went out and raised with an incredible team that we have, Nicole Borelli Hearn and Jenny Coons and Jeffrey Jackson Scott and Scarlett Kim and Kieran O'Connor and Angela Augustus and I feel like I'm forgetting someone, which is why I'm certainly not forgetting them. My brain is just pausing. We went out and I went out and worked and found partners who wanted to put money into what we're calling an incubator, and it's an immersive incubator. And so we had launched that incubator. We were able to, in 3 months, raise a little bit of capital that is doing that. And these are both, I'll say, a combo of investors that really they need the future of this field to exist. And so they're invested in us building where we are packaging. I think it'll be about 16 projects, which means we're getting them to the creative brief, how the business model works, and the budget. And then we are doing that while we raise $20 million for a slate where we will be able to prototype 5 projects over 3 years at these different venues that are not necessarily charging us rent. They are actually invested, ecosystem thinking, in the success of that prototype happening. So we are doing that, and it's everything from a project called Layla and the Starship Afrotopia, which is was seeded by this incredible creator, Jemai Youssef, and we're collaborating with her and building out how does that experience go into planetariums, and what is the merchandise, and what is the way, and how do I play with that experience? She had an animated series that she had been building. We're building a multiverse, Holmes, which is a Sherlock Holmes multiverse with that starts out in a kind of club with Holmes, which is the singer, and she sings different mysteries out into the world, and then you follow them, and it's scalable and continuable.
Nice.
Fornicated is one of our projects. We're looking at projects that are built for sports arenas. We have projects built for music festivals. We have projects. We're building an incredible project with Jenny Coons, who's one of our colleagues internally, called REM, which starts with a sleep study and goes into the incredible opportunity and imagination of dreams and all the ways that actually globally our dreams connect. And those are some of our original projects, but we also, the things I can't talk about is we're in conversations around also some licensing projects with established IP, but we're as interested in the original projects as we are in the licensed IP and trying to find ways for them to meet. Holmes is a perfect example. Like, it's an evergreen, it's content people know, but it's not owned by anyone. So we're in the midst of packaging all of these projects with incredible partners and advisors from across all different business sectors, video game, retail, production, relationship building, all those things, so that we build really, 15 robust packages that we will either put into the slate. So it helps us select the best slate of projects for each, to prototype, or get investment for one-off production. So we're trying to build a pipeline. And I'll be honest, while doing that, trying to train as much talent in the kinds of questions you ask to build this work, so that they could go out into the world also, and I would like more of this work, not, So that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, no, and I mean, that's kind of like, again, back to my archaic thinking, where there was always that thought of keeping that, not so much knowledge share. And this sounds the exact opposite. It's like, no, here's everything. It may be a lot. You're gonna be drinking from the fire hose, but go and go out there and make it happen. So like that's super exciting.
Yeah, I love that. I'm just like sitting here. My eyes probably just got really wide as I was listening to you. Like you're gonna have to like put some like heart eyes over my like edit that in or something. But that's incredible, the work that you guys have. So I was going to say, like, what do you have in the works? But it sounds like you have a lot in the works right now. So in wrapping this up, where can people follow along with you online or read more about what it is that you have going on so they can see the future of these projects come to life?
Yep. So I'll say a couple of places. So you definitely want to reach out to us at culture.house/immersive, or if you go to the culture.house, we don't have a .com, we have a .house, which always a lot of people email me and be like, I tried to email you at culturehouse.com, and I was like, well, I'm not there. But if you go to the culture.house website, we're /immersive, so we're there. Then you can follow us on Instagram at Culture House Media, which is our larger media. We're a part of that. You can also follow me at MTG Experience. Those are my initials. And then we have a really great newsletter through Culture House. Like we're a part of that. That's how we're part of the Culture House family, where we're making sure that a lot of the information that's upcoming is going on. But like right now, we are in the ecosystem building. So like genuinely the biggest thing we're looking for, we're raising money. We're looking for people in business who are wanting to be strategic and ecosystem thinking, and who are not afraid to walk into a room and share the good word of what is going forward. And it's an exciting time. So I think getting in touch with us about any and all of those things, but also following what we're doing. We'll start having play tests and things like that in the next couple of years. Our hope is that there's some projects that we'll get to play in prior to that. We're also doing some work for hire for some IP. And so we are continually, because we have a team that has some of the most experience in working with robust IP as well, we're also doing that. So we're open to all of that stuff right now and just trying to be a destination for how this field can grow. And I want to, and on a personal level, like I want to make another feature immersive entertainment. Like, and Mauro and I talk about this all the time. We're like, let's make another one,
Yeah, we're in.
Yeah. Well, and so for the people watching or listening, we'll have the links in the description, but just to make sure that we keep, Culture House like at the tip of the tongue. So, just constantly checking in to see like what's the next thing. So we're behind it. So
1,000%. You tell us what we need, we're there.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but I'm gonna be at the HouseCon, because I want to have this message and talk to folks about what the future of this is going to be. I think you're exactly right. We are in, what I'm excited about is we're in a moment now where our grief is able to turn to how do we grow, right? Grief morphs. And, how do we connect these stars in the galaxy to build this new universe, right? An ecosystem. So I think it's an exciting time.
Yes. Well, I'm very excited now because now we actually have a place where we can meet you instead of this 2D thing that we're doing here. So to this thing. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. This was an absolute treat for us that we are just going to be enjoying for a long, long time to come. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much I'll just say this last thing. I get really emotional. It was really hard to empower and build culture in that building that then had to end. And it lives on because there are fans like yourself and the fan community who have honored the performers and the cast and the crew in such a way and built relationships that allowed them to feel the success with all the things that go on in the media. I believe that you are how they experience what I know to be true, which is the success of that spark that you have, that they helped seed all on for thousands upon thousands of people. So
oh my God.
it is you that that help that give them that experience. Like I've watched it happen that they couldn't get from all of the other public things that have gone out into the world that don't understand, right? And so I just am so grateful. So thank you.
Thanks for making me cry. I feel like that's way too high of a compliment, but that's, I mean, we were all about just
I think it's a two-way road
yeah.
On that, because again, it was a learning experience for everybody that did experience it. And it's, again, we talk about not letting go. I think there's others that it's not a thing that you could just, it's ingrained. It's not just experience and then walk away from it. It was something that actually affected you. And
I think our big thing was always giving it the flowers that it deserved, was because it was gorgeous. Yeah. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Well, thanks.
So,
and
thanks.
Thank you
Sorry,
for having
I cried.
Me. We'll see you
yes, absolutely. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us for this episode. As Steven said, all of the links to follow along with Michael and what she has going on will be in the show notes.
Until next time.